There are times when a new indie game will come out and suddenly become the one game everyone seems to be talking about, at least for the first 1 or 2 weeks after its release. We've seen this before with other games, and now this phenomenon happened again with the release of Lucid Blocks. Lucid Blocks is it's a game, that's for sure, and the better way to describe it is probably a voxel-like surrealist exploration game whose main theme heavily revolves around dreams. A theme that is heavily reflected in pretty much every aspect of the game. Surrealist environments, strange and logic-defying creatures which the game refers to as vermin, and an infinitely procedurally generated environment in pretty much every direction. And yes, that does include the world vertically, as you will drop down into a chasm, fall down for a bit, only to find yourself in a completely different world. Everything about Lucid Blocks is meant to evoke this sort of weird feeling of familiarity, but also of confusion. Like, the elements and the general feel of the game are there, you can approximate what stuff is and what it can do, but you can't quite put your finger on the how and why exactly, at least not right off the bat. The game was released on the 13th of March 2026, after being in development for what I can assume to be more than a year, definitely more, given that the developer of the game, Lucid Blocks, has been regularly posting teasers and videos showcasing the game on their channel, with the oldest one, Blocky Liminal Spaces, dating to 11 months ago, showcasing a very early version of the game whose UI and aspect don't necessarily match the current version any longer, but the feeling that they were going for was definitely there from the beginning. The game in itself obviously shares similarities with Minecraft or Vintage Story or any other voxel game. I mean, it's a randomly generated world, you break blocks, build stuff and explore around, and while I heard the argument of Lucid Blocks being essentially just a rip-off of Minecraft, I will say that they are similar, not because it tried to emulate or copy its predecessors, rather because they simply just belong to the same genre of games, of voxel games. In this way, Lucid Blocks is as much of a copy of Minecraft as Silent Hill is a copy of Resident Evil, in the sense that they are not. The only thing they share is similar graphics and similar mechanics and gameplay, but the final product is something else entirely. Lucid Blocks obviously attempted to lean into this whole surrealistic dream theme and exploration of consciousness of sorts through many of its elements, which give it its own original touch, and perhaps other than the environment, another obvious element is how the game refers to certain things. While most sandbox games will refer to a specific playthrough as a world, Lucid Blocks refers to it as a qualia, a word used to define a subjective experience, a situation or feeling that, while all of us can experience it, most of us will perceive it differently from the rest. A good example of that is, pain, because I could pinch each and every one of you on the arm with the same strength, but most of you will perceive that pain differently. The crafting tab is referred to as apotheosis, which simply explained just means peak, in the sense that something or someone peaked, they reached their apotheosis. It can also be used more specifically in reference to a person specifically being raised to the status of a godlike being. God, I think I said specifically way too many times there, it's starting to sound weird. The equipment tab is referred to as paraphernalia, which is a word we can use to refer as a group of objects or tools. I mean, it's basically just a complicated or fancy way of saying stuff or things. Even when we press the ESC button in-game, the game doesn't refer to itself as being paused, rather suspended. All of this, along with many of the game's elements, its mysterious messages, its cryptic feel, and goals and everything bunched together can come off as pretentious. Like, I can totally see why someone could and would accuse Lucid Blocks of being just a more pretentious voxel game that attempts to pass itself as something more than it is. And you know what? I get that. It's a totally fair, not criticism, because I don't think this counts as a criticism, but it is a fair way to describe the game. But I think that when the developer, created this game and began assigning names and changing things up from the usual formula that we have gotten used to, I don't think it was made in order to be pretentious, to make it feel like a smart game for smart people, and if you don't like it because of how confusing it gets, you're an idiot. Rather, I think it was meant to better emulate this dream state, this dream field that they were going for, to give the game its own identity and its own touch of originality, which personally I see no problem with. I think it's great. Even if it's just purely something on the surface, I think it still worked pretty well in delivering what was, at least for me, a fresh experience. It allowed my mind to wander and attempt to fill the gaps and attempt to provide explanations in a world where there were none. Now, I could go on and attempt to, further explain what Lucid Blocks is and how its mechanics work, but I think that the best way to relay the feelings that this game evoked in me will be to simply show you what my very first experience with the game was, documented as I started playing the game the first time, because, trust me, the moment I booted it up, I knew I had to talk about it. I spawned in what was perhaps the most unfamiliar environment possible for a voxel game. While games such as these tend to usually start you off in areas where nature is prevalent, such as forests or beaches or natural biomes, Lucid Blocks decided to start me off inside the liminal exterior of a city, with buildings towering all the way up to the sky. I wasn't even sure how tall those buildings were, but they immediately managed to make me feel out of place, like I didn't belong there. Accompanied by that immediately unfamiliar environment, I saw strange white glowing shapes sort of floating aimlessly around. I began experimenting with the environment a bit and with the game controls. I could jump, but I couldn't sprint. I was able to collect blocks by breaking them with my hand, but I wasn't as of yet sure what their purpose was. Attacking the strange floating shapes would result in items dropping on the ground and the bar on the right side of my UI slowly filling up, but it was still unclear just what kind of purpose this will serve. I started fiddling around with the game's interface and discovered my inventory, what assumed to be a sort of crafting interface which the game referred to as Apotheosis, a paraphernalia tab which showed me what I assumed to be my stats along with 2 empty slots next to a mannequin head, probably meant for equipment, a rosary tab which I couldn't even begin to guess the purpose of, and a tome meant for drawing. I was not sure whether the tome had any specific purpose, whether I was meant to draw something on it to do other things, maybe it was a sort of a spell book, but given that the game allowed me to simply draw whatever in it, I began drawing the environment in front of me. I didn't focus too much on the crafting part of the game at first. This game's environment was certainly rather unique, so I began exploring, sometimes drawing on the tome as well. Eventually I began experimenting slightly with the crafting, or the apotheosis system as the game referred to it as, only for the bar on the right side of my UI to fill up. I was suddenly presented with a variety of options to choose from, each promising something different, which made me quickly realize that the bar on the right was an experience tracker, and interacting with the world around me by crafting items and defeating creatures, or vermins, rewarded me with this. Things were starting to make a little bit more sense, but I was still completely unsure of the general direction the game was heading to. I also didn't get too much into the whole apotheosis crafting system right off the bat. Maybe I was just unlucky, but it seemed that everything I was crafting would eventually just devolve into vomit blocks. I spent my first few hours of the game simply exploring around, enjoying the scenery, interacting with the various critters scattered around this landscape, attempting to figure out which one of them were aggressive to me on sight, neutral, or even docile to the point of not fighting back when harmed. I died many times during this initial phase, sometimes due to fall damage, sometimes due to some incomprehensible creature ambushing me unexpectedly, and sometimes due to the proverbial curiosity killing the cat. After each death, I would respawn into that city that had now become somewhat of a familiar sight, and yet each death never felt like a true setback. I was still holding on to my inventory. Even the experience I had gathered during that life didn't really deplete. Dying in this game apparently was not meant to be punishing, something that was greatly appreciated because it offered me more leeway in terms of what I could experiment and try out. Eventually I figured out that the best way to perhaps make some sort of progress in this game was to stop asking questions, stop trying to find answers, and simply wander around and try out things at random, collecting experience and unlocking new boons, as I like referring them to. At a certain point in the game I arrived across this field of ceramic pots. Breaking them would reward me with what appeared to be a randomized selection of blocks and items. I understood immediately that this place was perfect, as I now had access to a really vast selection of items to experiment with in the crafting section. By this point I had also leveled up a few times, and on one of those occasions I did pick on a boon that would allow me to set my respawn point. I knew that I had to set it somewhere around this place, as the lack of a map and the strange environments made it rather challenging for me to navigate it around, but before I could find a place that I would be satisfied with calling home, at least for the time being, I was surprised once again by this spider-like creature, suddenly crawling towards me. It was faster and bigger than I was, and if this game had taught me anything by now, it was that I should always expect the unexpected. And given the speed with which this creature was approaching me with, I was sure that it definitely didn't have any friendly intentions. For the first time I felt that if I were to die here, I would actually lose on potential progress, as the chance of finding that immense clay pot field again would have been rather slim probably. I attempted to outrun the creature, but as soon as it was obvious that this wasn't an option, I was left with only one answer: violence. Surprisingly, I managed to defeat the beast, even got an achievement for it, but I knew that the second time I might not be as lucky, so I found a tiny cozy space, a house made of pink and blue plastic, and I set my spawn point there. From that point, all that followed was me breaking pots, collecting the various items within, and attempting out to craft sort of whatever. There wasn't really any process to this, I was simply trying everything with a bit of anything until something happens. By this point in the game, the only real issue was a complete lack of storage space. My inventory was pretty much constantly full and I had no real way to store any of my items, so I sort of turned that into my goal, finding a way to store my inventory somewhere. I wasn't even aware if such a thing was possible in this game, but I assumed it did. It would have been irritating if it didn't, and this game did not give at any point the feeling that it wanted to irritate you. Weird you out? Maybe. Disturb you? Possibly. But irritate or annoy you? Not really, at least not yet. Through much experimenting, I eventually ended up creating a grappling hook, which I immediately began using. Mobility was definitely a good thing to have, and getting used to this device would only prove beneficial. So I made it my goal to attempt and climb the small mountain in front of me, not by building or breaking any blocks, simply by using this grappling hook, which after many attempts, I managed. I'm not sure if this was the game rewarding me for my persistence, but funnily enough, as I explored the very first structure in that mountain, I found it. A cabinet, sort of, to use as storage. All this time while I was screwing around with the pots, all the way down into the cliff, longing for something to store my stuff into, it turned out that what I was looking for was right there. I just had to look for it. I would like to say that this sounds almost poetic, but it was really just me getting lucky with the world gen, I assume. Oh, and I also managed to get my hands on a block that would allow me to travel to a sort of personal pocket dimension of sorts. That was perhaps one of my favorite things in the game so far, I gotta say. So with my respawn set in a place full of resources for me to experiment with, a storage system in place, and a few useful tools in my inventory, I felt like I had finally got some real, actual progress. While I felt like I did make, in fact, decent progress, I still felt like I didn't understood the rules of this world properly. Would placing a second respawn block allow me to choose where I respawn? Were there other useful tools or accessories I could craft? Was crafting or defeating vermins the better way to gain experience and obtain more boons? Now, in no way I claim for these to be actual answers, rather just my assumptions from what I learned by going in blind in the game. Number 1. Even if multiple spawn points were set, upon that I will respawn to the earliest one I had placed, rather than the latest. Number 2. Crafting and combining blocks would result in most cases always in blocks, while combining or crafting items that I was unable to either place or make use as consumables, so basically materials, would almost always result in a tool, and when a tool's durability would reach almost zero, I could simply repurpose that tool into a new one through the apotheosis system in order to create a new tool with maximum durability, at times even recrafting that one in order to circle back to my original tool, although the game didn't exactly have a lack of materials around, so I wasn't too worried about running out of tools. And number 3. While crafting items did seem to reward quite a bit of experience, it seemed that I would only receive experience for a first time discovery of something I hadn't previously crafted yet, or by attempting a recipe that I hadn't tried before. Gathering a bunch of 2 types of blocks and fusing them together over and over wasn't going to work as a way to farm experience, and it seemed that the fastest manner was just to defeat any and all vermins encountered. With these 3 assumptions, a decent storage space obtained from scavenging cabinets and cache blocks from my level ups and a variety of tools, I felt confident enough to finally attempt the next step of the game, the Tiamana Lee lines. When leveling up, the game will sometimes offer me as a reward a necklace whose purpose was to guide me towards the closest Tiamana Lee line, but I had ignored that option so far. I had too many questions about the game itself that I needed to find some answers to before starting to pursue an activity that would probably raise more questions. After all, I had no clue what a Tiamana Lee line was or what its purpose would be, but now after gaining enough familiarity with the game, its mechanics and environments, it felt like it was finally time to attempt this next step. And so I did. Guided by this mysterious pendant, I reached a structure which contained a shiny and, well, important looking core, which transported me to another place. Traps, enemies, I found myself trapped in what appeared to be a sort of challenge gauntlet. Which after clearing brought me back to the same place I had arrived from and rewarded me with a lot of experience. I wasn't still sure what the purpose of that was, but checking on my rosary I realized one of the beads on it had lit up, and that's when I understood the goal of the game. It's not that I didn't have a specific purpose before, I just wasn't aware of it yet. What I just described up until this point, was my very first experience with the game, and I hope it managed to convey just how much of a unique and refreshing experience it was. But now I want to end up this video by talking about the game's reception on launch, some of the negative aspects, and whether I would actually recommend the game or not. The reception for this game was very good, fantastic actually. Overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, right off the bat, and I can't say I'm too surprised about it. After all, Lucid Blocks was a game that had gathered quite the attention before its release as well, with the developer's own YouTube channel uploads easily going into the hundreds of thousands of views, which, you know, it's definitely quite something for what are meant to be just promotional videos. Companies will pay top dollar for this sort of reach, and the fact that the dev managed to achieve it simply by uploading bits and pieces of the game, showcasing its evolution during the development phase, was definitely a decisive factor in this game garnering the attention it did on launch. Now, most of this video, or probably a good part of it, was just me praising the game. I praised its visuals, I praised its atmosphere, its originality, its soundtrack. God, the soundtrack is so good. And pretty much everything there was to praise about it. But I feel like we need to talk about the negatives too. For this purpose, I'm going to do a bit of a tricky thing here. The idea for this specific part of the video was to pretty much read over the negative reviews of the game, see what kind of arguments and problems are brought up with the game, and attempt to sort of either defend against them or support them. But I'm not gonna do that, or at least not now. What I'm going to do is bring up what I personally found as negative, so not to be influenced by other people's opinions. Because, after all, this video was meant to be my personal review on the game. And I feel like reading other people's reviews might end up influencing my own thoughts and opinions on it. And I first and foremost want to present just my own personal thoughts for now. So let's start with the game's premise first of all. As I said previously, I feel like this game did a really great job in the exploration department, but I think it fell short on the whole creative part of it. Like any voxel-like game, a big part of Lucid Blocks mechanics revolve around being able to collect and place the various blocks that you can find around the world. The problem is, there really isn't much that you can do with these blocks. I can make a house, sure. I mean, I can put some wood on the floor, make walls out of brick, throw in some glass to make windows and make a roof, and I got the premise of what could potentially be a house, but I don't really have anything else other than blocks. There are no doors, no stairs, no sort of furniture, or not really anything that I can build with other than the same cubic shape. I really don't want to compare this game to Minecraft and say that, unlike Lucid Blocks, Minecraft does present ways to create stuff out of more than just the default block. I don't want to make this comparison because these are obviously not the same game. They don't even have the same premise. But as much as I don't want to make this comparison, it feels rather inevitable, sort of like the elephant in the room. If you're playing Lucid Blocks to create stuff, then you're just better off playing, I don't know, pretty much anything else, as Lucid Blocks only offers variety in terms of the block's texture, but at the end of the day it is the same block over and over, just with different colors. Now, I could overlook this fact. I mean, I did end up building a house in the game in my private pocket dimension, the one that the game provides you with, and I gotta say, it was actually kind of fun to do so. But the next problem with the game, in terms of building, is related to this pocket dimension actually. It turns out that the only viable space where to build something is within this exact pocket dimension. Making builds on the outside of this personal space that we're given is an exercise in futility. I'm saying that because, first of all, there really isn't much that you could build that doesn't already exist within this world. Anything you want to build, chances are if you walk around enough, you'll eventually just find it. Another problem is that if you want to build outside of your pocket dimension, is that you'll have to find a place where you want to do so, set your spawn point there, and stick with it. Navigating the world of Lucid Blocks isn't necessarily a challenge in itself. The real challenge is to navigate it consistently. Getting lost within this game is extremely easy, but that's not the issue at hand here. In fact, I love this aspect of the game. But the game's world does pretty much extend infinitely in all directions. So if you build something somewhere and you didn't set your spawn point nearby that place and happen to, somehow wander off, well, I mean, good luck in finding that place again, because believe me, during my playthrough, I barely, if ever, stumbled across the same place twice, unless I happen to have my spawn point set nearby. So the only truly reliable place where to build your stuff is within your pocket dimension, which I think is the whole purpose of, since the game does put a lot of emphasis on exploration and wandering off. If you are playing this game, you're never truly meant to just set your spawn point somewhere and remain there for the vast majority of your playthrough. The game does pretty much push you to explore further and further. I think that one addition that could solve this problem would be the existence of some sort of teleportation mechanic, perhaps through some blocks that could function as portals or gateways, allowing you to fast travel from point A to point B. Sort of like Valheim in a way. I think that will definitely go a long way in motivating me to actually build something in the main world rather than just the pocket dimension I have access to, and I don't think it would affect the balance of the game in any way, really. Also, a way to quickly travel back to your spawn point would be pretty nice, because currently if you wandered off too far away from home and you want to go back, the only option realistically is to just throw yourself off a cliff. Now there may be a way to do this, but if there is, well, I sure as hell haven't found it yet. Also, the game does present a few enemies that attack by just tossing bombs at you that can and will completely destroy your stuff. And those are not the only enemies capable of breaking or otherwise changing the world around them. So if you happen to build something in an area where these guys can spawn, well, tough luck. I'm just saying, mobs being able to grief your builds in a game that wants you to build stuff is a bit counterintuitive. If anything, having my stuff blown up does make me want to build less, or at least makes me not want to build anything in certain areas. Not that I was going to, because, you know, I have a pocket dimension and all that where I can build. Now let's talk about the tools. I love the tools in this game. The bee glove they use to glide, it's adorable. The grappling hook, it's actually fantastic. I love the grappling hook and traveling around with it. It is so satisfying once you get the hang of it. The weapons are... I mean, they're okay. No matter what weapon you use, it always shows up as this sort of tiny toy knife, unless you're using a wand, which, you know, that's whatever, it's fine, I guess. But my problem with the tools is the following. The durability. Why does durability exist in this game? I get that in other similar games, durability exists as a way to sort of motivate you to find more of the same resource, because the moment durability doesn't apply to a tool, you don't really have much of a reason to create more than one of the same tool, which means you don't have any reason to collect more than one of each material required to create it. But in Lucid Blocks, the moment your durability on, let's say your hook, starts reaching its limit, all you have to do is simply drag your hook into the apotheosis bar, turn it into a pickaxe, and then turn said pickaxe back into a hook again. Boom! The hook is fully repaired, and it took me pretty much nothing in terms of materials. If repairing an item is that simple, then why not just remove the durability mechanic altogether? Because right now it doesn't feel like a challenging element, it doesn't feel like it adds anything to the game itself, it just feels like something that requires me to stop from whatever I'm doing at the moment to drag my tool into my UI a couple of times if I don't want it to break. And while we are on the page of tools, can we talk about the lack of visual diversity in terms of textures for them? I mean, look at the blocks for a moment, yeah? We got essence blocks, grass blocks, zany blocks, vomit blocks, flash blocks, teeth blocks, sun blocks, star blocks, and so many others that I can't even begin to count. But for the tools, it's pretty much the same things over and over. Are you using a pickaxe? Well, it's a hand rake. Are you using a shovel? That's also a hand rake. Are you using an axe? Hey, guess what? That is also a hand rake. Well, at least if I'm using a knife, it shows up as an actual knife, but if I switch to a sword, it's... no, wait, it's still a tiny knife. Well, I mean, at least the food is... yeah, no, it's a clownfish. Every food is a clownfish. I think you get my point. Having the same textures reused for every tool, weapon and food item sort of makes them feel more like a placeholder than anything else. And I think that a bit of diversity in that regard will be greatly appreciated. And as far as personal complaints go, this is pretty much all I have. But what other criticism arose regarding this game, and not from me, rather from the community? Gameplay doesn't live up to the visuals. The first couple of hours are exciting because it gives the impression that there is more depth than there really is. This game is more of an LSD Dream emulator with Minecraft flavoring sprinkled in. Definitely a fan of mixed aesthetics, but unless you're mainly interested in the random generation sightseeing aspect of the game, the combat and building and endless trudging around empty landscapes are painfully boring. I would have enjoyed more overt horror and rewarding exploration and crafting, and motivation I had to continue playing was driven by the thought, surely there has to be more to this, right? Don't recommend. I expected LSD Dream Emulator x Minecraft. Got an aimless walking sim with an intentionally obtuse crafting system, headache-inducing filters, getting one-shot by random mobs, and overall was just boring. I also can't see more than 20 feet in front of me and it really bothers me even if it's part of the aesthetic. I heavily do not recommend this unless you want a walking sim. It's not even that fun as a guy who likes exploration. It's a banana on the wall kind of artsy video game. As much as I love how this video game and its environments look, the game feels like it has nothing to do inside of it other than walk around and explore aimlessly. Shallow gameplay loop and unrewarding meta progression outside the amulets that point you where to go. There is almost no incentive to build anything meaningful. None of the creatures I discovered had any interesting interactions other than golems, which just build upward for some reason. Overall, just very boring once the novelty of the unique aesthetic wears off. I couldn't really get into the game. It has interesting visuals, but there is not much to actually do in the game. One can only aimlessly walk around in a dream world for so long before it becomes dull. I might give this game another chance down the road if it gets more content updates, but for now I don't see much reason to keep playing this. The initial novelty is enticing since mystery drives intrigue, but once the veil is lifted there is no reason to stick around. These are only a few of the negative reviews for Lucid Blocks, and judging by them and others, it appears that the biggest criticism addressed to Lucid Blocks is essentially a lack of substance. Now, is this a valid point? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Yes, I believe that this is probably the game's greatest flaw and its biggest issue. In terms of gameplay and variety in what you have to do or can do, Lucid Blocks does unfortunately fall under the category of being wide as an ocean but deep as a puddle, and Lucid Blocks, given that it came out as a full release, cannot avail itself of the classic early access excuse. Now, does this mean that the game is bad? No, absolutely not. I cannot overstate how much I personally liked and enjoyed playing Lucid Blocks, but whether I would actually recommend it or not is a whole different story. I believe that the criteria for knowing whether this is a game that you should play is the vibe. It sounds stupid, but the game's vibe is probably its greatest strength. It's what made me want to play the game in the first place, and it's what made me like the game despite its issues, and I would only recommend it based on this criteria, whether the vibe that this game exudes is appealing to you. Are you looking for a voxel sandbox survival construction game? Then you should probably try out Vintage Story. But if you're looking for a game that holds unique visuals, an original atmosphere, strange and yet captivating environments along with odd mechanics to accompany it, packing everything under the liminal dreamcore/weirdcore aesthetic, then Lucid Blocks is definitely the game for you. And while I was perhaps a bit harsh in its criticism in this later part of the video, I think it's only fair to mention that the number of people who reviewed this game negatively and didn't find the experience it had to offer up to their standards is so much smaller compared to the amount of people who actually enjoyed the game, who actually got intrigued what the game presented. Of course, this doesn't make the criticism addressed to the game less valid, it just means that if you're unsure whether to try the game out or not, statistically, you are more likely to enjoy it than not, and I'd say that for $10 that is definitely a risk worth taking, because believe me when I say that throughout my life I have paid far more for titles that have offered me far less than Lucid Blocks did. I think this is a fair price for a fair product that obviously had a lot of love and care and attention put into it, and these are the kind of games I want to see more of in the future. Not every single game has to be spectacular, not every single game has to be innovative in terms of gameplay, but I think that every game should be made with love and passion first and foremost, and Lucid Blocks, I can tell just how much love, how much time and how much effort went into this project, and this is just an undeniable objective fact. The game is certainly not perfect, but there was certainly an effort, and it is something that really shows. I would like to end this video, like always, by thanking this channel's members for their support. It's amazing, it means the world to me, and if you would like to join them, you can do so by clicking the join button down below. I would also like to thank everyone who has watched my videos lately. I had a bit of a rough patch on some previous videos, but the last 3 I posted had some pretty good numbers on them, and for that I would like to thank everyone who actually watched the videos until the very end, who commented their thoughts, letting me know what they enjoyed about the videos in particular, and providing fair and constructive criticisms to what I could and should improve. And I would like to request for you to once again do the same under this video as well. pushing the like button if you enjoyed it, the dislike button if you didn't, and letting me know your thoughts on it and on the game itself, of course, in the comments down below. I don't always answer to every comment. I mean, sometimes I don't know what to say, so I just sort of like the comments or give them a big heart, but you can be damn sure that I do read the comments. It's actually sort of become a morning ritual for me to just kind of wake up in my bed, prop myself with my back in a sitting position, turn on my phone and read through the various comments you guys leave. Some of them actually make me laugh a bit, and some actually just make me straight up smile, and they're generally very positive. You guys seem to appreciate these videos and it shows through the comments, and that always gets like a smile on my face, and it's a great way to start my day. So yeah, just leave your thoughts or questions or complaints or anything down below, and I'll make sure to read them and reply to them if I got something to say. Otherwise, if you want to hit me up with anything, I got a Discord server as well. Small community, but really fun, so feel free to join that as well. Hit me up in the DMs even if you just want to talk about anything. With this being said, I hope you enjoyed this video as always. I wish you a good night, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.